Hello, everyone. It's time for Van Chicagoland Stories, the podcast. I'm your host, Pete Costanas. This is episode 338, season 14. Today's date is June 9th, 2024, and welcome to the program. Yes, I have another one for this weekend. On today's program, I'm going to talk about the Eagle Food Center stores. It comes under different names, Eagle Discount Market, Eagle Discount Supermarkets. It was the same. So I'll talk about its history and my memories of that. Also, I'll talk about a TV show that aired in the 1970s. It was called Tilmon Tempo, and it was hosted by Jim Tilmon, which you all remember. He did the weather forecasts on Channel 5 WMAQ TV in Chicago for many years. And I'll talk about that as well. Right now, the program will go into a commercial break. And this program is brought to you by U-Ban Coffee. And here's a commercial from 1970s. Something like that, yeah. And about 73, 74, 75, around there. So, I'll talk about a little bit about that after the commercial is played. So, just sit back and relax, and I'll be right back with the program, folks. Thank you.
Oh, sure you can't stay for more coffee?
It's late, and Jim never has a second cup.
You know, I'd love another cup.
Jim never had seconds of my coffee. And I make pretty good coffee. But that night, we both discovered U-Ban.
U-Ban, special coffee, because it's made with special beans, 100% Colombian, for taste and aroma so deliciously rich.
Hey, how about seconds for me?
U-Ban, with richness worth a second cup.
Okay, everyone, I am back. I hope you enjoyed the commercial for U-Ban Coffee. This coffee brand's been around a long, long time. The reason I chose for this commercial is the other day my mother bought this for the first time. And she asked me, do you know about this brand? I said, yeah, I do. It's been around forever, but she never noticed it. I'm sure she did, but she never bought it. So I figured, why don't we try it and see? We haven't opened it yet, so maybe soon. And it's like Colombian coffee, which I like, and she doesn't because it's too strong like that. But I'm sure it'll be fine. Anyway, here's the history of this coffee brand. It was created by a man. His name was John Arbuckle. And he founded the Arbuckle Brothers Company, and the company was a coffee roasting and sugar refinery company. And John Arbuckle III was born in Scotland, and he entered the grocery business with his brother Charles in 1860. Well, way back. This is like during the Civil War, like that. And they got into the coffee business, but it was not in Chicago, it's in Pittsburgh. And they patented a formula. It's called egg-based glaze that coated coffee beans. There were a lot of coffee brands that did from the past. And then they moved the business to New York in 1871, and then they sold packaged coffee. He was one of the first. And he invented a machine and to fill, weigh, seal, and label the bags in one continuous operation. Very interesting. So that's wonderful. And then they started selling it, and then he was nicknamed Mr. Coffee. Not Mr. Coffee in the old days where Joe DiMaggio did the commercials. That's not that. That's something else. Okay. And he was in the sugar refined business, so I won't talk about that. That's a separate subject. And then he passed away in May 27, 1912. And so I think they sold the business And their location was in the Dumbo area in Brooklyn. That's like it's like near in Brooklyn. They call it Dumbo. It's like down the district like that. And then it was sold to it's still in the family, but they sold it to Maxwell House in 1935, and then that became General Foods, if you remember that. And they renamed it U-Ban, and that's an abbreviation of Yuletide Banquet. That's where they got the name. And General Foods is gone, I believe, and now Kraft Foods owns the brand, as far as I know. And then, so it's still around, but it's not as popular as the other brands, like, for example, Maxwell House, Folgers, Hills Brothers, like that. Today is, we got Starbucks. If we want our coffee fix, I understand, but it's so expensive. It's very expensive indeed. I like it, but I go to Starbucks once in a blue moon. I don't, if I'm out or someone treats me or I meet a friend and he says, Pete, let's go meet at Starbucks. All right, I'll go. I'll order coffee. That's it. Most of the time I drink it at home. I still have a percolator. It's darn good coffee. It really is. Or like in the drip. It smells wonderful. They did, if you remember Wacky Packages in the 1970s, they used to call it Cuban. So they had that, and it showed, I don't know, some guy that looks like Fidel Castro. That was hilarious. I love that. So I'll try it, and we'll see what happens. I'm sure it's good. I like mine strong. Okay. At the beginning of the program, I mentioned I'm going to talk about the Eagle Food Centers, the supermarket that was in the Chicagoland area for many years. Also, I'll talk about the TV show Tilmon Tempo that was hosted by Jim Tillman. Before I get started, I want to mention one thing, not about my health. I'm okay. Still get people, they throw me, not throw me, they send me suggestions of what I like to talk about on my podcast. I still want to do them, but sometimes I forget, and whenever I think of a subject I want to talk about, sometimes I get like kind of like writer's block. You're like, oh, I'm stuck. What should I talk about? Something new, it's hard. So that's what I did yesterday. I thought about Eagle. Someone mentioned that, and also about Jim Tillman. But I talked about Jim Tillman when he died, and I covered an episode about him. But I never talked about his show that was separate from his weather forecast. So I don't know, talk about that. Because it's interesting. Excuse me. There's I spoke to my brother yesterday on the phone from California, which he's retiring. He's officially retired. He's done. So he's going to leave soon and come back here. Not right away. Maybe later this year. He's got things to do. And I asked my brother, I'm kind of, the well is dry in a way. So, well, what should I do? He goes, you got a lot of things to talk about. Don't worry about it. It'll come to you. Chicago has so many things that happen over the years that have disappeared, revived, and never came back. Okay, so that's good advice. Okay, so I hope so. Like I said before in the previous podcast episode, I might talk about a subject that I talked about previously. I will do that, but that was a long time ago. I started this podcast about 2 years ago, so it doesn't matter. But I had one guy not too long ago. He says, "Oh, you talked about this subject already." He must be a follower. So, yeah, okay. what are you going to do? So it needs to be mentioned again, but I can mention more information or correct it. Which incidentally, yesterday I talked about Pat Sajak on Wheel of Fortune. When he left the game show and he hosted his talk show, I think he left I'm not sure. Did he? Because there was a daytime version and there was a nighttime version. I think he left one of those versions. I think he was still hosting. So I think that was the case. So he was still on the show. So I apologize to everyone about that. Excuse me. So I got to get my facts straight. He's been on so long. And the man who took over, his name was Rolf Bickerson, something like that. He used to play football, and he took over. I remember watching him. He didn't look he looked kind of stiff. He didn't look, he looked nervous, I guess he didn't do well. I think he didn't respond to the audience. The audience didn't respond to him very well like that. So he was let go. And then someone named Bob Goen, I think you remember him from game shows and Entertainment Tonight. He took over. He did okay. I remember that. I don't know what he's doing now. So that worked out fine. Okay. All right, so let's get started with Eagle Food Center stores. I'll give you a little history, a couple memories, and also I found an ad from November 22nd, 1982, lists all the locations at the time. Interestingly enough, there was none in the city of Chicago. There were in the beginning. I know at first there is a photo that it did open in the Edgewater neighborhood up north of Chicago. I think the address is 5900 Broadway. You don't say North Broadway. You don't say North Broadway Avenue, North Broadway Street. North Broadway. No, just Broadway. And that opened, I think, like 64 it opened or something like that. And I don't know how long that was there. Probably quite a while. And then they closed. And then they started to expand to suburban areas, obviously, because a lot of people moved out there and they needed grocery shopping and became successful. So here's the history of this wonderful establishment. So it was called the Eagle Food Centers, and it was not just operated in Illinois. It was operated also in Iowa, Wisconsin, Indiana for a long time. The company was based in a town called Milan, Illinois, and it was in Rock Island County. It was under many names indeed. So for example, it was operated as Eagle County Market, Eagle Discount Centers, Eagle Discount Supermarkets, Eagle Food Centers, you name it. That's what it did. And they also owned Memco. That was it was a chain of, it was like Costco. It was in the 70s. I'll talk about that another time. And then it just changed into Eagle Supermarkets until the 80s, but it lingered on after that. The first family that opened this store, their name was Tenenbaum. Tenenbaum or Tenenbaum? Tenenbaum, yes, in Davenport, Iowa. And then, there was, they operated a small neighborhood. There was some other people. Name was Eagle Cash and Carry. That was another store. And that operated in the Quad Cities, like Davenport, Moline, and all that. And they merged, and then all of a sudden they became Eagle. Now, and then, for my memories of that, I remember the commercials, and then that popped up everywhere. And as for the one that I mentioned in the city, I don't know if there was anywhere else in the city. Maybe, possibly, yeah, like that. Some people compared the Eagle store to Butera. That was a Chicago store. Butera's still around. There's a couple of them, but they used to be all over. Just from what I heard, it was not bad like that. So for the locations of the store, I have them right here. Okay, and I'll get them to you right away. And I was very surprised when I found it. I really was. So, it's funny like that. Okay, here we go. I'm going to find it for you. Okay, here we go. Here we go. Start at the beginning. I'm not going to read the addresses. I'm just going to read the suburbs. Maybe if you're familiar with them. So I'll get started right now. They had them in Addison, Illinois, Arlington Heights, 2 in Aurora, 1 in Bolingbrook, 1 in Bradley, Illinois, downstate. The one that's familiar to me is Bridgeview, Illinois, which is now Tony's Finest Foods, which my mom goes shopping all the time. So, and remembered that location. I really do. I remember that one. The others were Buffalo Grove, Carroll Stream, Carpentersville, Chicago Heights, Countryside, Crest Hill, Crystal Lake, Dalton, Downers Grove, 2 in Elgin, 1 in Oak Grove Village, Elmhurst, Franklin Park, Glendale Heights, Glen Ellen, Glenview, Hazel Crest. I remember that one. I drove by there one day a long time ago, and I stopped by, and it was right there. Hoffman Estates, Joliet, Kankakee, Lake Zurich, Libertyville, Lincolnwood, Lindenhurst, McHenry, Montgomery, Morris, Morton Grove, Mount 2 in Mount Prospect. That was surprising. Mundelein, 2 in Naperville. New Lenox, Norwich, Oak Forest, Orland Park, Palatine, Plano, Illinois, Richton Park, Round Lake Beach, Schaumburg, St. Charles, Waukegan, West Chicago, Willowbrook, and, of course, Woodstock, Illinois. Okay. Phew, that's a lot. All right. Right now, I'm going to play a commercial of Eagle. I found that on YouTube, and this aired on WGN-TV, Channel 9 in Chicago in 1981. It was during the holiday season. So you might remember that. And it's also on YouTube if you'd care to watch it. And this takes me back. It really takes me back. So here's a commercial for Eagle Foods from 1981 that aired on WGN-TV, Channel 9 in Chicago during the holidays. And I'll be right back with the Tilmon Tempo Show. Okay, folks? Thank you.
The wonderful tradition of holiday baking comes to life at Eagle. If you bake from scratch, you'll find flour, sugars, candied fruits, and more. Special things for your special recipes. Or enjoy the extra convenience of selecting from the many freshly baked breads, rolls, and pastries. Now at Eagle, your holiday food store.
Okay, everyone, I am back. I hope you enjoyed the commercial for Eagle Foods from 1981 that aired on WGN-TV, Channel 9 Chicago. So the stores started to close up. They filed for bankruptcy, and some of their assets were sold, and some of the stores were this happened in 2003, most of them like that. And the reason they did that, they couldn't compete with other chains, like, for example, of course, Jewel, Dominick's, Kroger, other stores like that, not just in Chicago but elsewhere in the United States. And so let's see. So, and some of the stores, they were acquired by other chains. So, for example, Jewel took over the Eagle stores, Butera, like that. It's the same thing happened with Dominic's. When Dominic's went out of business, some of the Jewel stores took over. And almost all of them were acquired by Jewel. There is one Dominic store that has not opened yet, and that's on 127th Street in Ridgeland in Palos Heights, and it's still standing vacant. I don't know what's going on with that. It's just sitting idle. I don't know what they're going to do with it. Excuse me. So that's a great memory, because people, according to some people liked the store. They really did. As for pricing, or like quality, it was pretty good. It wasn't like, like today we got Eats Market. They're expanding all over the place. Jill's still around, thank God. And so, but there are few independent supermarkets like that. So Eagle used to watch the commercials all the time in the late 70s and the 80s, mostly the 80s, so. And I asked my mother the other day, do you ever shop there? She goes, no, I never shopped there. She didn't remember shopping there. She never had the opportunity to do that. Okay. But we weren't living in the area at the time. We lived in Chicago and, in the city, and there was no Eagle store around in the vicinity. So that's a shame. Okay. Also, there's memorabilia that are sold in eBay. Shopping bags, plastic bags, name tags. It's hard to find photos of that place. I got a couple. That on my files, I do post from time to time, so people remember working there, as their first job as a teenager, or they met their wives, their husbands, or, when they got hired, when they got fired, all kinds of stuff. I read the comments, that posted on my account. So it's interesting like that. Okay. Right now, I'm going to talk about the TV show Tilmon Tempo. Now, this show aired on WMAQ TV, Channel 5 in Chicago, and it was hosted by Jim Tilmon. Now, Jim Tilmon, you all remember him. He did the weather on Channel 5 for many years, and then he moved to, I think, Channel 32, Channel 2. Yeah, that was later. But he was a pilot, very experienced pilot. And from what I remember him from many years, he seemed like a very nice man, very knowledgeable, very personable. He seemed, great guy. He really was. So he hosted this show. And I did some digging. I want to find out when it premiered. And it did premiere on June 2nd, 1972. And that aired on Friday nights. But I believe it changed days. But it was aired late, very late, like midnight. I don't know if it aired Sundays. Maybe. But I used to watch, I remember seeing that when I stayed up late on the weekends when I was very little. I shouldn't have done that. My parents yelled at me, go to bed. So I caught a glimpse of him, hosting this show. And it's like, it had a nice catchy theme song. Unfortunately, there's no audio or video of that. I wish there was. And I remember either he stood or sat. And he says, hi, I'm Jim Tilmon, and this is Tilmon Tempo. And he interviewed people. He had musical acts, mostly targeted to African Americans at the time. Also politicians, entertainers, like that. And looked like a nice show. Very nice show. I don't know where they got the title. And that lasted about 4 years, from 1972 to 1976. And during that time, he got hired on Channel 5 as the weatherman. And he became a big hit. So he was on the TV station for a lot of years indeed. And so I guess the ratings for his talk show just sank, and he just quit like that. I think he hosted another show on Channel 11 before that. I forget the name of it, briefly. So maybe he took that concept and moved it to that one. And then, so that's just a nugget, a memory of that, which I remembered, and I'm sure some people do, but mostly they remember Jim Tilmon doing the weather. And they remember him as a pilot for American Airlines. He was a trained pilot. He flew. I think he flew on the weekends. I think that's what happened. So he did the weather, and then he flew on the weekends. Very busy man. And then he retired later on, and then he passed away about the show was called Our People. So, and that was that. So he passed away about 3 years ago in January. I remember that. And so, he was one of the great memorable weather forecasters we had in Chicago. For example, Harry Volkman, John Coleman, John Coughlin, PJ Huff. He goes way back. He's famous for his drawings. Someone asked me, can you do PJ Huff? Can you talk about him? I did talk about him, but I might talk about him again. We'll see. So I wish I could see a clip of the Tilmon Tempo show to get the feeling of you're back in the 1970s, and everything was very calm and relaxed. His talk shows. So, as an interviewer, I don't know how he was. Maybe he was wonderful. Maybe he was nervous. He was, I don't know. I have no idea. Okay. Anyway, so that's it for this program. I'll do a recap of what I talked about. I talked about the Eagle Food Centers, Eagle Supermarkets, all the names and that were located in Chicago. Also, the TV show Tilmon Tempo, that was hosted by Jen Tilmon, who did the weather for Channel 5 in Chicago. That aired for 4 years. This podcast will be published later on today, wherever apps are. It'll be on the apps whatever they're available. For example, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, Breaker, Overcast. There could be some other apps that I'm not familiar with. They could be there. I've been told. You get access of that. Just click follow. You'll get the latest episode. You get a notification. You can listen to previous podcast episodes if you wish. Also, it'll be published on my blog, vanchicagoland.blog. Also, it'll be on my YouTube channel. Again, if you want, people ask me, where do I find your podcast? Go to YouTube, type in my name, or Van Chicagoland Stories, the podcast, and you'll find it. Click subscribe. It doesn't cost anything. You can listen any place, and on your desktop, your phone, your tablet, any device you have that's convenient for you. Also, be shared on my social media accounts: Facebook, X, LinkedIn, Reddit, Blue Sky, Threads, TikTok, and Instagram. I think I covered it all. Okay. So this is Pika Stein, your host of Van Chicagoland Stories, the podcast. Thank you for joining me today. It looks like a beautiful day. I heard it might get windy a little bit, but it looks nice compared to the rain yesterday. And we'll see. I'll probably do another podcast on Tuesday. I'll see what I will talk about. Given some thought. Okay. So here's bye-bye from me, and here's a little traveling music from Ray Rayner saying bye, bye, bye. Take care, everyone, and so long.
We have to go. Bye, bye, bye.